This is Katrin with Disability Rights New York. Welcome to our podcast, Empire State of Rights Closed Captioned. We are here to bring you information on the most relevant topics regarding disability rights and advocacy. As New York State continues to address the coronavirus pandemic, Disability Rights New York will be recording podcasts specifically targeted at bringing you up-to-date information and resources, and we will do our best to get you information as it changes. If there is a topic that you would like us to address, please comment below or email us at podcast@drny.org. Today we welcome DRNY's PAIR and PAIMI Director, Marc Fliedner. He's here to discuss the latest ways to keep safe during the COVID-19 pandemic. Hi, Marc. How are you doing today?
Great. It's good to be here with you to talk about this topic.
So here we are about 9 months into the pandemic in New York State, as changes have been made really around March of 2020. And some COVID fatigue is setting in. And this is a term that we're seeing pop up not only on the news, but in conversation in general. And let's talk about what COVID fatigue is really looking like right now.
I think that it's fair to say that if we listen to what the doctors who are on the front lines and are looking at all the data are telling us, it's an unfortunate time for us to be having the fatigue because it's understandable, but it's coinciding with the time of year when things are getting colder and we're going to be closing the doors and closing the windows and gathering as needed and as desired in inside spaces. And that is a place where the virus likes to be and likes to thrive. And so we have to renew all the commitments we made early on in the pandemic, despite our fatigue, to plan ahead for how we're going to keep ourselves and our loved ones safe in indoor settings. And people with disabilities, we know, tend not to be planned for, and their circumstances tend not to be thought through as much as the general population. So it's more important to our folks than anybody that they plan ahead to keep themselves safe because folks with disabilities are uniquely vulnerable.
Those are good points, Marc. We're now in the full swing of fall, and we've had some nice respite in the summertime to be able to go outside and experience some things and a little bit more of normalcy than we had maybe in March, April, and May. So we're looking at behavior transitions. We're looking at starting to plan in a different way. So whether we're talking about people with disabilities or people who are just trying to plan their holidays with their family, let's talk about the planning and what does that really look like for everyone who's trying to get a little bit of socializing into their life, especially around the holidays right now.
Right. I'd like to kind of suggest that people think about the space that they're entering and ask themselves, at least as a starting point in terms of their planning process, 3 questions. What space am I entering? What is the group of people who are entering the space with me? And what do I need to make that space as safe as possible? And I'll just kind of break that down a little bit. Probably the most important thing is to think about the space that you're entering. While homes tend to be a little bit more intimate and tight than our employment settings, the reality is that some of them can be spacious and, more importantly, can be configured in ways that allow people to sit and stand and communicate with distance as a part of the thought process. The things that folks need to be thinking about in both a work or social setting is things like the exact structure of the building and the space. Is it, for example, a space that's got hallways that are really narrow where people are going to be traveling through? Because if that's the case, then you probably want to get yourself some arrows in place that indicate that folks are going to go one way and not overlap with each other and therefore violate our social distancing rules. If it's a place that has poor or tends to have poor ventilation, the virus enjoys that kind of a climate and thrives in it. So we need to ask people to think about that in terms of how long they're going to stay, or maybe some modifications they can do to the way that air is coming in and out to accommodate the visitors to that space. And even, of course, things like, are you working in an environment where everybody's got a private office with a door that gives them a private space? Or is it a cubbyhole, cubby situation, which is really kind of hard to accommodate? And then what are the number of feet between the individuals that are working in this setting? So These are just examples of the things that people will see if they take the time to step back and really look and inspect with the knowledge that we've had for the last several months. If we turn to the whole idea of who's entering the space, I think that's where it becomes important. In a family situation, there's probably more likelihood that you can plan in advance. You can really talk it through on phone calls or Zoom meetings in advance and talk about how you're going to have the seating. And also, as importantly, who's coming that may be particularly vulnerable and who should be planned for most. But in employment settings and other sort of like government settings where you may need to go, you need to be looking at who's in there, because we can have a combination of managers, for example, who may tend to have that nice closed office space, but need first and foremost to be thinking about what all of their employees need. So managers now need to be thinking, as people start to get back to work from at-home settings, about everything they need to put in place to keep people, particularly people with disabilities, safe in that environment. And then you have to think about, is it all employees who can follow a policy manual and sort of policy directives that have been set forth in emails and such? Or is it a space where visitors are going to be coming and going? And how are we going to accommodate their entrances and exits and the different parts of the building that they travel through? Again, it's a matter of stepping back, and there are a lot of good advisors, companies that are providing advice, and there are things you can find on the internet that help folks who want to do right by all of their employees and their businesses to come up with a plan that is completely in place before folks start to walk in. The third category, what do you need in the space? And that's stuff that people are starting to get used to, but it's things like, those temperature takers that'll hit you as soon as you get in the door, a place to wash your hands or sanitize as soon as you get in the door, some of those stickers with arrows and also that indicate 6 feet distances from each other for the purpose of social distancing. What is the equipment? That space needs to be stocked with to keep everybody, workers, visitors, family, friends, safe.
I think that's right, Mark. Again, we're talking about planning on a new and different level, one that's really considering space, taking a look at it from a different perspective, doing an inventory, seeing what you have that can make it work. And of course, going back to the basics around combating this virus. And we're talking about masks, we're talking about sanitizing your hands, washing your hands often, making sure that we are keeping 6 feet apart and maintaining social distance. And this is something that maybe people laxed a little bit about during the summer because, again, we were outside, we had some freedom of space, we weren't confined to buildings or offices or dining rooms or kitchens. So we're talking about going back to the basics in a way that has to be very intentional and planned for so that you know that when someone's coming into the office, they have their mask on. They have their mask on until they get to their office, or when people are arriving at your house, having their mask on, making sure there's plenty of soap to wash your hands or hand sanitizer. And let's just talk about ways that people can plan for being outside or running their errands and, again, going to markets, or if they need to go pick something up at a store, that they're prepared and they have things with them to get in and out without having any problems.
Yeah, I think it really, for the most part, that goes back to some of the norms that we've set up in the summer and early fall and spring. Sometimes it's hard to remember how long we've been in this position. And I really appreciate your focus on masks, which I didn't explicitly mention, perhaps because I think those of us in New York State have done a really good job of making it a norm. And I see that it actually distinguishes us from some other states where friends of mine will say, I visited X state, and it's just not the culture. They're just not doing it. Obviously, we have to remember that mask is not only for your sake, it's for the sake of those around you. And if it helps people in terms of reminding themselves of why they're going through the pain in the neck of putting it on and having it in your pocket or having it in your book bag, always having it handy, think about it this way. I could be walking by somebody with comorbidities, a person with disabilities, who could be impacted simply by the fact that I carelessly walk by them without a mask. Maybe putting it in that context will help some folks that are either starting to feel the fatigue and becoming lax or never really bought into the concept. I think that the equipment, gloves for those who think that it's appropriate for them, need to do that. Remembering that wool gloves or cotton gloves are not protective in the way that the gloves that we might have been using this summer are. And so let's really think about the surfaces that we're using and we're exposing ourselves to, and how we handle our alternative. If we need something heavy, is that a material that can carry the virus for a period of time? And if it is, then what do we do when we get home or take it off to make sure that we're caring for it before we put it back on or expose anybody to it? So thank you for really focusing on that, because I think it's become an ongoing debate in the country, and I'm not sure why.
Agreed. I think we're still seeing the mask debate out there. And the reality is there are so many resources for us to point to say that masks work. They're working. They're doing what they need to do, not only, as you said, to protect us, but to protect our loved ones who may be compromised in some way. So it's always a good reminder to have your mask handy wherever you're going. So we also have a lot of resources on the DRNY website still available for information on COVID. Marc, I know we talked briefly about balancing, and I think that this is the way we can end the podcast today. Let's talk about the balance. This is certainly not all doom and gloom. This is information to let people know that there are safe ways to interact. And so talk to us a little bit about balancing and how people can look at living some sort of normalcy or normal life and balancing the real dangers of COVID.
Well, like in the parts of New York State where we've seen that following the rules worked, then I think we've gotten pretty good at balancing. We haven't stopped going out for our needs. We haven't stopped going out for some social opportunities, but we've always taken care planning into consideration. And, I'm going to kind of switch over primarily from my PAIR director hat to my PAIMI director hat now, when I say that the holidays are a blessed time. We love them. They're also complicated, a lot of different reasons, but missing them, feeling like we need to shut ourselves off from having those opportunities to get together and gather with family is not necessarily the right decision. And talking about this planning is in no way suggesting that getting together isn't the right thing to do. It's all about the planning. The getting together, the making adjustments, but making holiday traditions work is going to be really healthy for folks, because the impacts of isolation, of the kind of anxiety and sort of even loneliness and just feelings of depression to come over us during the holidays, we don't need to give up the opportunities. We need to simulate different ways to do it. And it could very well be that we can get pretty darn close if we just plan ahead and maybe incorporate some of those things, under the Christmas tree. A mask may not be such a bad idea, especially if it's one of those cool ones that you see online, or really just provide ourselves with things that we need now, because Dad may need more sweatpants more than he needs another tie that he's just not going to be wearing for the next few months. So these are the kinds of things that I think we need to think about when saying balance is the most beautiful idea for the holidays.
Absolutely. Marc, thank you so much for your time today. It's always a pleasure talking with you.
Oh, same here.
Empire State of Rights Closed Captioned has been brought to you by Disability Rights New York, your source for disability rights and advocacy. If you enjoyed our program, make sure to subscribe, like, and share this post. If there is a subject you would like us to discuss, please email podcast@drny.org or comment below. Tune in next Wednesday, where we'll bring you more information on disability rights in the state of New York. The closed captioned and ASL version of this podcast is available on our YouTube channel. To listen to more Empire State of Rights Closed Captioned, follow us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify.